Coconut milk is one of those grocery products that makes people feel smarter the second it lands in the cart. It looks simple, it sounds traditional. It usually sits in a small, quiet corner of the shelf surrounded by words like organic, premium, unsweetened, authentic, natural. And that is exactly why this category gets away with so much. Because most shoppers are not looking for candy here. They are looking for the cleaner option, the cooking ingredient, the pantry staple that feels less manipulated than the rest of the aisle. But canned coconut milk has a strange little secret. A lot of brands are not really selling you coconut milk confidence. They are selling you texture management, label theater, and just enough tropical branding to keep you from asking a basic question. If coconut milk is supposed to be coconut and water, why does this can need help pretending to be rich? So this is not a panic video, and it is not a recall list. These 9 are the brands I would avoid if your goal is simple, more transparent coconut milk with fewer formulation games. And the 2 I would actually trust more are not perfect miracle products. They are just the rare cans that make fewer compromises and hide less from the buyer. That difference matters, because in this category the biggest trap is not sweetness, it is false purity. You think you are buying one of the most straightforward foods in the store. What you are often buying instead is a product that had to be rebuilt to feel premium again. The first pattern is the organic halo trap. This is where brands wrap themselves in the cleanest language on the shelf, then quietly lean on gums to hold the illusion together. Organic does not automatically mean simple. It does not automatically mean less processed. And in coconut milk, that matters more than people realize, because once a product is diluted or standardized, companies often have to engineer back the body shoppers expect. The first brand in that pile is Thai Kitchen Organic Unsweetened Coconut Milk. This one has shelf credibility. It is mainstream, recognizable, and for a lot of people, it is the coconut milk they started with, which gives it a kind of default trust. The can looks like a safe middle ground product. Not junk, not dessert, not bargain bin chaos. Just a normal, respectable pantry item. But the ingredient list includes organic guar gum. That does not make it poison, it makes it a clue. Because now the question becomes why a product wearing the costume of straightforward coconut milk needs a texture assistant in the first place. And once you notice that, Thai Kitchen starts feeling less like a clean pantry staple and more like a carefully managed version of one. The front sells comfort, the back sells control. That gap is the issue. And here is why that matters in the real kitchen. When people buy canned coconut milk, especially for curry, soup, or sauce, they usually want the can to do one thing naturally: separate, hold richness, and bring body, because the coconut itself is rich enough to do that. When a brand leans on gum, it is often compensating for the kind of consistency shoppers expect, but may not actually be getting from coconut alone. That is the quiet trade. Not danger, compromise. The second brand is 365 Organic Coconut Milk. This is the premium grocery version of the same trust play. The wording sounds clean. The store environment adds an extra layer of confidence. People assume the private label from a health-forward retailer will cut the fluff. But the ingredient list still brings in organic guar gum. Again, not a scandal by itself. The problem is what it reveals about the product logic. A lot of these brands want the visual simplicity of a clean label staple while keeping the texture insurance policy that makes the product feel consistent every single time. Consistency sounds nice until you realize it may be standing in for concentration. If a brand wants creaminess but does not want to rely entirely on the coconut to deliver it, that is not the most honest version of the food. Third is Simple Truth Organic Unsweetened Coconut Milk. This one is a perfect example of why shoppers keep getting fooled by virtue language. The name itself is doing work. Simple, truth, organic, unsweetened. It practically reads like a warning label against skepticism. But then you flip it, and there it is again. Organic guar gum. The pattern repeats so often in this category that after a while you stop seeing separate brands and start seeing the same product strategy with different fonts. Cleaner mood on the outside. Formulation support on the inside. That is why I would avoid it if your goal is true simplicity. It is not because the ingredient list is huge. It is because the branding promise is bigger than the ingredient honesty. Fourth is Good and Gather Organic Coconut Milk. This one matters because it shows how deeply the category has standardized this compromise. Different retailer, different audience, same basic move. Organic coconut milk, water, organic guar gum. And once you have seen Thai Kitchen, 365, Simple Truth, and Good and Gather all orbit the same formulation logic, the bigger story becomes obvious. This is not one bad actor. This is a category-wide comfort blanket. Companies know most buyers are not reading coconut milk like they would read protein bars or breakfast cereal, so they keep the label short enough to look clean, but not quite simple enough to be honest about what the texture depends on. Pause on that for a second, because this is where the aisle stops making sense. In a category built on one ingredient doing most of the work, shoppers have somehow been trained to accept rebuilding agents as normal. If you shake the can, and it always behaves like a perfectly disciplined beige fluid, that may feel reassuring. But natural coconut milk is not supposed to act like it graduated from corporate finishing school. Real separation is not a flaw. A thick cream cap and a looser base can actually tell you the coconut is still being allowed to behave like coconut. Some of the most trusted cans on this shelf try a little too hard to look convenient, and convenience is often where purity gets negotiated away. Now we move into the second pattern, and this one is even sneakier. I call it the split brand trap. This is where a company gives you one line that deserves real credit and another that rides the same reputation while taking a formulation shortcut. And the best example here is Native Forest Organic Classic Coconut Milk. This is a brand a lot of ingredient-conscious buyers assume is automatically one of the better choices. Sometimes that assumption is earned. Sometimes it absolutely is not. The classic version still includes organic guar gum, so if you grab it just because the brand has a natural store reputation, you may end up paying premium shelf money for the exact kind of stabilizer compromise you thought you were leaving behind. That is what makes this one more frustrating than the obvious mainstream brands. When a bargain label cuts a corner, people shrug. When a health store brand does it, people often do not notice. And that is why this version belongs on the avoid list. Not because the brand is all bad, but because it proves a sharper point. In this aisle, you cannot outsource your judgment to the logo. You have to read the specific can. The company may know exactly how to make a cleaner version. If the version in your hand still uses a helper ingredient, that was a choice. This is also where a lot of viewers realize they have been buying labels, not products. They remember the can, the shelf, the color palette, the store lighting, maybe even a recipe they saw online. They do not remember the actual structure of what they bought. Coconut milk is especially vulnerable to that because it feels like a heritage ingredient. Something old world, something too basic to be sneaky. But modern grocery shelves are full of old-looking products built for modern texture expectations. That tension is the real case file here. The third pattern is what I call the no-gum bait and switch. This is where a brand avoids the ingredient shoppers have learned to side-eye, then swaps in a different kind of compromise, so the can gets to look cleaner by one standard while still solving a shelf life or consistency problem another way. Brand number 6 is Goya Coconut Milk. On first glance, a lot of shoppers feel relief here, because the product is presented as unsweetened and specifically framed as not containing gums, thickeners, or stabilizers. That sounds like a win, and compared with the gum-heavy cluster, it does remove one of the biggest concerns buyers have. But then the can brings in potassium metabisulfite as a preservative. For some shoppers, that alone is enough reason to pass. For others, it is not about avoidance of one preservative as a moral event. It is about the brand no longer feeling like the simple pantry coconut milk people imagine they are buying. Once preservatives enter the picture, the product shifts from straightforward extracted ingredient to managed packaged system. Again, not scandal, just distance from the purity image. And then there is brand number 7, Chowco Coconut Milk. This is where the category starts borrowing authenticity to lower your defenses. Because once a can looks imported, traditional, and deeply tied to a cuisine, many shoppers stop interrogating it. They assume the product must be closer to the real thing, but Chowco's ingredient list includes coconut extract, water, citric acid, and sodium metabisulfite. That is the important distinction. Imported does not automatically mean less engineered. Familiar in restaurant cooking does not automatically mean cleaner for your pantry standards. In fact, some of the cans with the strongest aura of culinary legitimacy are counting on you not to apply the same scrutiny you would apply to a wellness-branded American product. Here is the practical takeaway in plain English. Do not let the absence of guar gum hypnotize you. In coconut milk, companies can remove one red flag ingredient and still leave you with a product that is more processed, more managed, or less transparent than the label vibe suggests. The game changes. The trust gap does not disappear. Now we get to pattern 4, and this one is the industrial patch-up pattern. These are the products that come very close to sounding like what you wanted, then ruin the simplicity with one weird little fix that tells you the texture or structure needed backup. Brand number 8 is Arroy D canned coconut milk. I am being very specific here because product format matters. Some people know Arroy D for cleaner options in other packaging, and that is exactly why this brand is such a useful warning. The canned version widely sold through specialty channels has been listed with 99.95% coconut milk and 0.05% polysorbate 60. And this is one of those moments where tiny percentages can distract from big meaning. Because the issue is not how much of it is there. The issue is that a product this close to being just coconut milk still needed an industrial emulsifier to behave the way the company wanted. That tells you something about priorities. Not rustic simplicity, controlled performance. That kind of near purity is one of the most seductive traps in the aisle. People see 99 point something and mentally stop reading. But the last fraction of a percent is sometimes the most revealing part of the entire label. It tells you whether the product is willing to let coconut milk be naturally imperfect, or whether it still wants a lab-coached finish. If you care about straightforward pantry ingredients, that difference is not nitpicking. It is the entire point. Brand number 9 is Essential Everyday Coconut Milk Unsweetened. This is the one that exposes the bottom-end version of the same problem. Here you are not getting a quiet little gum tucked at the end. You are getting a full construction crew. Coconut extract, water, distilled monoglyceride, guar gum, polysorbate 60, sodium carboxymethylcellulose. That is not coconut milk simplicity. That is coconut milk reconstruction. At that point, the can is no longer trying to preserve the natural behavior of the product. It is trying to override it. And once you see that, you start recognizing why some budget coconut milks feel strangely uniform, strangely slick, or oddly resistant to the kind of natural separation people have been taught to treat like a defect. If you have bought one of these for years, this is the part that matters most. The aisle trained you to value obedience over honesty. It taught you that a can which pours the same way every time is somehow better than one that needs stirring. But in coconut milk, a little mess can be a sign that less has been manipulated. The more aggressively a brand smooths, stabilizes, emulsifies, or preserves, the more likely it is solving for shelf performance before it is solving for ingredient integrity. So let's step back and look at the entire case file. 9 brands, but really 4 recurring patterns. The organic halo pattern gave us Thai Kitchen, 365, Simple Truth, and Good and Gather. The split brand trap put Native Forest Classic under the microscope. The no-gum bait and switch caught Goya and Chowco. And the industrial patch-up pattern nailed Arroy D canned and Essential Everyday. Different shelves, different shoppers, different price points, same deeper issue. The can wants to feel simpler than the formulation really is. And now the category gets interesting. Because there are 2 cans that actually move in the right direction. The first is Native Forest Organic Unsweetened Simple Coconut Milk. Not the classic, the simple. That one distinction is the whole lesson. This version is just organic coconut milk made from organic coconut and filtered water, and the company specifically states that it contains no guar gum and is packed in BPA non-intent cans. That is what a cleaner trust signal looks like. Not just fewer ingredients, but fewer unanswered questions. The product is not pretending texture has to be babysat. It is letting the coconut do the work. It also earns points for something a lot of brands never make easy. It tells you the cleaner version exists in plain language. That matters, because transparent brands reduce decision friction instead of burying the better option under nearly identical packaging. And this is where the sensory part finally helps the shopper instead of confusing them. With a simpler can like this, separation should not scare you. A richer cap, a denser spoonful, a looser layer underneath, that is not the product failing. That is the product refusing to act synthetic. You may need to warm it slightly or stir it. Fine. That is a small inconvenience, in exchange for a label that reads like food instead of product design. In a grocery world obsessed with frictionless performance, sometimes the safer choice is the one that acts a little less polished. The second brand I would put in the actually trust more category is Nature's Greatest Foods Organic Coconut Milk. Again, this is not a magic health badge. It is a cleaner label win inside a messy category. Their stated formula is coconut and purified water, with no added sugar, carrageenan, guar gum, or sulfites, and the brand also highlights a non-intent BPA-free lining. That combination is rare enough to matter, because remember, the best coconut milk is not just about what is missing from the ingredient list. It is also about whether the company seems willing to talk clearly about the container, the additives it avoided, and the basic structure of the product, without hiding behind lifestyle fog. And there is a bigger lesson in why these two stand out. They do not win because they sound the most exciting. They win because they interfere less. They do not need to decorate simplicity. They do not need to dramatize authenticity. They do not ask you to ignore a helper ingredient because the rest of the branding feels wholesome. They just get closer to what most people assumed they were buying in the first place. That is the cruel little joke of the coconut milk aisle. Shoppers are trying to make a cleaner, more thoughtful choice, and the shelf keeps rewarding them with fake reassurance. Organic can still mean stabilized. Imported can still mean preserved. Premium can still mean diluted and rebuilt. Budget can still mean engineered into submission. The front of the can is usually selling a mood. The back of the can is selling the truth. So if you want one practical rule after all of this, use this one. First, read past the adjectives. Ignore organic, premium, authentic, natural, unsweetened for a moment. Second, count how much help the coconut needed. If the can relies on gums, emulsifiers, cellulose, or preservatives, ask why. Third, do not treat separation like a defect. In this category, a little natural instability can be a better sign than a suspiciously perfect pour. And fourth, when possible, reward the brands that disclose both cleaner ingredients and cleaner packaging choices, instead of forcing you to piece the story together yourself. Because the real issue here was never whether every can on the avoid list is catastrophic. It is that too many of them are coasting on the assumption that nobody will ask hard questions about something this basic. And when the product is this simple on paper, even small compromises become revealing. A gum tells you the texture needed support. A preservative tells you shelf behavior took priority over purity. An emulsifier tells you the product wanted to feel more stable than nature made it. A 5-word label can still hide a trust problem if the 5 words are doing too much image management. And that is why this matters beyond coconut milk. Once you see this pattern here, you start seeing it everywhere. Broths, nut milks, pasta sauces, yogurts, anything sold as pantry simplicity can become a stage set for processing shortcuts. Familiar branding is not proof. Health store placement is not proof. Imported packaging is not proof. Even a short ingredient list is not always proof if the one extra ingredient is there to cosmetically rescue the product. So out of the 9 I would avoid for cleaner buying, the biggest repeat offenders are the ones hiding behind the organic halo and the ones asking additives to simulate richness. And the 2 I would actually trust more are the ones that let coconut milk behave like coconut milk and tell you more clearly what they did not add. That is the entire lens. If you have one of these in your pantry right now, go check the can. Not the front, the back. Tell me which brand you bought and what the ingredient line actually says, because I guarantee a lot of people in this category have been buying confidence instead of coconut. And if there is another grocery aisle you want broken open like this, drop it in the comments, especially if it is one shoppers think is automatically healthy just because the packaging looks calm.